And I've been in egg retail ever since. And I started my own business a year and a half ago. So I actually live 20 minutes from here, but I'm on the Iowa side. So I'm not a Husker fan. And I actually went to South Dakota State. So go Jackrabbits.
Go Jacks.
Brian, how about you?
My name is Brian Evans. I'm a eighth generation farmer in Missouri with my wife and my 3 kids. We do row crops, corn, soybean, cattle. We have a farm to fork. On the cattle side, we own our own retail store and website, and we integrate cover crops and no-till for beans, and I don't know, that's kind of rundown.
Sounds good. Caleb.
I'm Caleb Fink. I'm from Tripp, South Dakota, born and raised on the farm. 6th generation family farmer with my dad and my sister. Grandpa's finally retiring out, and my wife Tony. And so we're corn, soybeans rotation. We've got a cow-calf operation on the side as well. And then I graduated from South Dakota State as well a couple years back, and now back farming, and started with FBN as a community builder about 18 months ago. So I've been working with their lineup of seed and excited to be here.
Super. Thanks, Caleb. Mitch?
My name is Mitch Thompson. I'm from southeast Minnesota. I'm a dairy farmer. We milk cows on 2 sites, grow all our crops. I've been using FBN corn and products for several years. I'm a community builder as well. I think it was maybe 3 years ago I started with that. And just take care of everything, I guess.
Okay, super. Well, again, appreciate you all being here. And today we're talking about seed trends for 2023. So certainly you may have questions. We certainly want to address those and answer those as we can. So if you have a question, certainly get to the mics and we'll be able to handle those as well. But just to get us started, panel, I think it's kind of interesting to just start with some of the trends that we're seeing in the marketplace, and you may see some others as well. Obviously, as we look ahead for 2023, we're seeing prices up. Obviously, with commodity prices, certainly on the bean side of things, we're seeing a dramatic price increase. There's still, I think, enlist versus extend questions out there in the marketplace. We're also hearing about short corn out there and maybe its application within the marketplace. There may be other things you want to talk about, but what are you seeing as you either talk to your customers or look at your own farming operations? What are the most important factors that you're looking at and some of those trends that are affecting your operations, your decisions for this next year? Caleb, let's start with you.
Sure. I think one of the things that we talked about earlier in our area is the kind of that enlist versus extend conversation. And I think that's different everywhere you go. I hear a lot of folks talking about it. Everybody's switching to enlist and going away from the extend side. And really that's in our area not totally been the case. I mean, it is in some places, but where I'm at, some of the customers that I'm working with, I know we have some guys that are going exactly the opposite. They're going totally extend and away from the enlist side. So I think it's one of those you have to really pay attention to, what it is, what's right for your operation, and go from there.
Okay. Mitch, what about you? And obviously with silage, you're a big silage guy, right?
Yeah, so everything we grow is all conventional. We do some traded on corn that we plant after we take our rye crop off. So we take rye on about a third of our acres for forage. We take it for dairy feeds. We take it early. And then we go back with the traded corn there. Generally, we run mostly all conventional. It seems like it's got a better digestibility. It seems to feed better to the cows. So I like it that way. And on a cost savings standpoint, I mean, I'm harvesting that crop. I don't have that long-term standability issue for me where maybe somebody that would want to go with a traded versus a conventional may have. For me, I'm taking it off 2 months before they do. So,
yeah. Indeed. Brian, how about you down there in Missouri?
On the soybean side, enlists is in our area where everybody's leaning towards. Don't have problems with neighbor stuff anymore with that. On the corn side, traded is and untraded is a big thing now. More people are talking to me about untraded seed. We're all conventional. You can get a little premium right there on the river. And same way with conventional beans too. We're getting a premium down there on the river if they're wanting to do that. But Most of our customers are looking at just for the ROI on the corn is the main concern.
Jim, what are you hearing from your customers? Obviously, you're talking to a lot of farmers with your business there with the Western Iowa agronomy. What are you hearing from them?
So I cover a big area. So I go from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, down to Southwest Iowa, even into Missouri. And this year, the majority of the acres are going to E3 soybeans, endless soybeans. A lot of the big Pioneer dealers are now that used to sell the dicamba and enlist program are now selling all enlist soybeans, which makes it a lot easier for those of us out pushing enlist beans. And then on trades versus conventional, it's all over the board. Like I have some dairies, just like Mitch, that are all conventional. But the majority of my territory is traded. But it used to be back in 2009, 10, when prices were high in Northwest Iowa, everything was smart stacks. And then when prices went back down, everyone was going to VT2, so they're not getting that below ground protection. So there's a lot of stuff that's changed and going all over the place. But I do have guys that are going from traded, trying conventional, and then I've got other guys that are by West Bend that have been conventional for years that are trying traded. And then obviously we have a lot of corn on corn acres in Iowa, and so we're using a lot of the smart stacks corn on those acres or the VT2 with insecticide at planting.
Let's talk a little bit more about that traded versus conventional conversation, and how do you go about the math? How do you make that decision? How do you determine when to make that change? Brian, I know you mentioned some things there with some markets. That sounds like you've got some premium opportunities there. Obviously, that's helping, obviously, in the equation.
Yeah, so you can, advertise a premium down 30 miles away delivery and versus just roughly in our area, traded versus non-traded, going to be about $40 an acre seed cost saving, plus you're going to get 40 to 60 cents premium at the river. We haven't seen the yield drag. This year we will have some traded corn in the bottoms, but the rest of our corn will be all untraded. And I think, and we use it too on our farm to, feeding the cattle out, non-GMO, promoting that through that meat market too. So it adds another premium there on that side for us. So.
Okay. Now, Jen, you mentioned that, I think some guys are actually going probably more traded in your marketplace versus maybe some of these other markets we're talking about. Talk a little bit about that and that decision process that they're going through.
Just some of the trials they've done, and then the high rootworm pressure or things that they've had there. And then every area is different. Like my Northwest Iowa territory, you've got some towns that have 3 locations you can haul grain to. And every 10 miles, there's different options. Like there's so many co-ops, and you get down here around Kunz Bluffs, you got Sires, you've got Bungie, and then you've got to go another hour away. So a lot of their decisions are determined on where they're selling their grain to. So.
Okay. How about you, Caleb?
I think we're seeing the same thing on the corn side. At least where we're at in South Dakota, I don't think we see the premium opportunities on the corn side yet. I think those markets are starting to emerge, though. So there's some conversation there. I think most of the conversation on traded versus conventional in our area is just based on, what do you really need? We've been really pushed for the last number of years on double stacks, triple stacks, got to have it. And the reality is, in our area, we don't have the corn room pressure like they do in some other places. And we don't have very many guys doing corn on corn. So that really helps if you're doing that consistent rotation between corn and soybeans. You just don't have that pressure. So do you need to be paying the extra dollars for those traits in the bag? And so my advice to guys has been, it's not like you got to switch the whole farm over at one time, but try some. Take some conventional corn or take some of the off-patent GT traits that we've got and put some out, and see what it does for you. Because every farm's different. We know the variability in the soil from place to place. Even, my farm to somewhere up north and by Parkston, it could be a little bit different. So that's on the corn side. On the bean side in South Dakota, the South Dakota soybean processors in the last couple of months has gotten really aggressive in their non-GMO soybean market. So I know this next year I'm going to be putting out some of the new Virtue Line non-GMO beans because if we're hauling up to their plant in Miller, They're looking, you can lock in right now a fall basis of $325 over Chicago board price.
Wow.
And then if you're willing to carry that forward and store on farm, you know, they're doing, their premium goes up every month by about 3 cents from there. So even for us, being that that's, I mean, it's quite a haul to get up there. When you start penciling it out, you know, and we've grown some non-GMO beans in the past, and we didn't really see much for yield drag. They seem to do just as well as a lot of the extend varieties that we're planting at that point in time. At that point, when you start penciling out, that's kind of a no-brainer to at least think about it.
Yeah, especially if you've got that in your local market. Not everybody has that opportunity, but wow, I mean, that's a $3 plus premium. That's pretty amazing. So good for you guys. Glad you have that local opportunity.
And cheaper seed on top of it.
Yeah. Okay. Mitch, for you, I guess that not only is it a trait versus conventional, but you're also looking at feed value as well, right?
Right. So that's my biggest push to the conventional, was obviously to save some money. I've seen a good return on the feed value of the feed, and I'm saving money. So I thought that was a big benefit for me, and that's why we switched to it. We do have some traded, like I said before, but for the most part, we stay conventional. I've had good luck with it. There's a lot of other farms in our area where there's, most of the dairies do plant some conventional. There's some that don't plant any and some that plant all. So we're probably really diverse as who's planting what, but as far as grain corn goes, I would say most of it is traded in our area. There's some conventional corn side, but most of it has went traded.
Okay. All right. Super. Just checking to see if there's any questions out there. If there are, just go ahead and get up to the mic and we'll make sure and address those too as well. Don't see anything right now. Let's switch gears a little bit. One of the other big questions that I get, it seems like almost on a daily basis, is, you know, what about these biologicals? You know, are they worth it? You know, how should I be evaluating these things? When do they pay for themselves? Jen, I know you have an extensive background in this area. I mean, what's your advice for farmers when they're taking a look at all these products that are available in the biological space these days?
So biologicals, yes, are very beneficial. And if you look at all of, I mean, we're in the Midwest here, and if you look at the guys that are getting the top soybean, corn yields, I mean, they're using the biologicals. And the biologicals are nothing new. And if you're, I'm sure you guys have all been paying high price nitrogen, P&K fertilizer costs. So there's so many biologicals you could be using with those fertilizers to help protect that input cost. So I like Humix and Fulvix is something FBN can carry. So if you're using like a starter, putting a Fulvic with it can help protect that starter product and actually help get those nutrients into the plant more. And then a Humic, which is nothing new, and it's something that you can put with your dry P&K, your urea. You can put it out any time of the year. I mean, these products are nothing new to the market. Like, yes, they're like you get the snake oil type stuff you will hear out in the country. But I mean, if you have some guy that you buy that changes your oil that is coming out to sell you some little product that you can put with your crops, I mean, that's something I would maybe do some more research in. But I mean, these biologicals are nothing new. And it's something you should definitely be trying, even if you're out. And I know Nebraska, do we have any Eastern Nebraska people here? I know you guys top dress a lot of urea. So putting like a humic with that product can help protect that nitrogen and keep it from volatilizing in those high temperatures. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I heard something that Mexico is going to put a ban on transgenic crops, and I just wonder what that's going to do with our market as far as, 30% of our export corn goes to Mexico. And I was just wondering, is it going to create a whole different, do you have to contract your conventional corn if you want to sell in that market, or how's that going to work?
Any insights there, panel?
I can take on that one. So this probably falls into my wheelhouse. And the other part of my life, I've spent some time in politics. And I guess this would come back to my advice on most politics in general is there's always a lot of hype about things. And I would, be calm before I go out and make any kind of rash decisions on things. But with that said, if they really are serious about, banning those trades on those genetics, and basically that's just going to mean that if we're going to continue to export into that market, you're going to be looking at those non-GMO crops. And potentially that means that there's extra markets that may open up that right now where we don't see those premium markets or separate market streams, that may just become a necessity of the industry going forward if those end users for us, whether it's your elevator or whoever you're doing business with, if they're currently exporting into Mexico, they're going to have to adapt, and that's all there is to it. But going back to kind of the overall thing, I think it'll be a little while. There's definitely going to be a lot of talk about this going back and forth because it is a substantial change for those people working in those trade markets.
Good. Thanks for the question. Let's get back to the biological conversation a little bit. Jen, did you have anything else to add there?
Yeah,
before we move on, or-
there's a very diverse line of biologicals. There's so many different things you can use. I mean, who out here is using biologicals now or has in the past? Okay, so it's obviously been nothing new, but there's so many options you can use. I mean, I come from corn soybean country, and your corn, like early in the season, is taking on a lot of zinc, sulfur. So there's a lot of products you can be putting out foliar with that first pass of corn with your herbicide. And late in the season, your corn is going to take up a lot more nitrogen as well, and the potash. So there's products you can be putting in with like a foliar fungicide. And so if there's products you want to try and it's something you've never tried before, like go out, split some fields and do it. Don't just do it the first year. I mean, do it year after year. I mean, because I don't know if for most of you, but I haven't had a regular growing season in Iowa for a very long time. It seems like we're either under extreme drought or we get way too much rain. And it's the same thing with you go out and try one corn hybrid. Maybe you don't, it's a little 5 bushels less, but it's been the top corn hybrid for the last 5 years. I mean, don't just make your decision off of this last growing season. I run into so many farmers that are like, well, that didn't do, it was 2 bushel less this year. Okay, well, our growing season's be a lot different next year. Let's not base our next year's decisions off of what happened this year. But if there's any biologicals you want to try, but just do your research. And so like me as an agronomist, I sit down and I talk to my farmers and give them my spiel on the products that I would recommend and that we have research, yield trials, been around. But it's just the same thing with like fungicide. I remember going out talking to farmers about fungicide back in 2007, 2008 when I was just starting. And that was the same thing where you split your fields, did some trials, and you had to have your aha moment, as I call it. So even for me, as an agronomist, I make my money off of selling something, but I have to know that products work before I'm going to go sell it to my grower. So when I was out I had a 12-state territory, and I was out talking and teaching all of these sales reps rooms like this on humics and fulvics. And I, for myself, I don't farm. So I went and put some strips in my yard just to do my own little trials. My husband's actually in here, and he had his own landscaping company, and he sells mowers and snow blowers and fixes them. So we always have to have the top yard in the whole neighborhood. So we started yard wars. So I went out and put these strips of humic in my yard. And it had been 2 months and we had 6 inches of rain. And I was out in Kansas for a week for work. And I was like, gosh, if we had another 3 inches of rain, I think I would see something. So I come home and I go look, and there's just boom, grass is 4 inches taller, deep green, and there's these strips in our yard. And so I was so excited. So there I had my moment, aha, I know this product works. And then 30 seconds later, I'm like, uh-oh, my husband's gonna kill me because now I have to go try to correct these trials in our yard. And sure enough, 2 hours later, when I came back home, him and 4 of the neighbor guys are all standing there looking at it like, ooh, can we get this? So that's something too. I'm like, if there's newer products out there, just trial them, and don't just after the first year, depending on what the weather season is. I mean, try it again. I mean, so just make sure you're doing these trials over and over and making sure, if you're going to split a field, we have variable soils in our fields in Iowa, where it goes from sand to super high pH, that's muck. So just make sure you're doing those trials equally and doing it year after year and just proving it to yourself. And that's kind of how we started in Northern Iowa with fungicides. And now I don't have a single farmer that will not put a single acre of soybeans out without a fungicide application.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. Good advice.
but yeah, there's so many, and it doesn't matter if you're like in Kansas and you're doing starter or you do dry or you do liquid. There's so many different biologicals you could be using, and just protecting. I'm from Northwest Iowa, so I'm Dutch and we're cheap. And so for me, like knowing that you're spending $1,500 a ton on anhydrous, I definitely am going to be using something to help protect that product that I'm putting out there and that investment to get the most out of it. So, and it's nothing that's going away. There's just going to, there's going to be more product offerings coming out. So just ask if you're not using something now, ask your agronomist, your supplier, and they can give you some options. But FBN does have a lot of products to offer. And two, the Cobra days, maybe some of you are still spraying Cobra on your beans late in the season. It used to be back when we sprayed Cobra on that, like the 2-pass Roundup on the soybeans was easy. And then it got to where that wasn't working. So we had to do Cobra or some other products like Flex Star, and you get that burn. And I just tell my farmers, okay, go on a vacation for a week, don't look at your field. And there's products like Ataris that FBN has that'll help alleviate that stress so you won't have so much of that burn. So it's a very dynamic product offering.
Good. I didn't realize when Jen asked the question, I think all three of you raised your hands and said you're using something within the biological space. Brian, let's start with you and maybe just the other two comment as well. What are you using today and how did you come to that realization, that choice to use whatever you're using today? And I don't know what you guys are using, so please share.
We just essentially started with wanting to do some in-furrow pop-up starter and saw that as an opportunity to put some other stuff in there and started using biologicals. We'll do even like a pivot bio, zinc, sulfur. There's a FBN sells it. I'm trying to think of just the micronutrient package, humic, folics, using all that. And we're putting a folic in furrow with insecticide. And I don't know, it's plant health right from the beginning and really getting the crop out of the ground at the same time and not damaging, excuse me, not damaging the seedling with, low salt products and then the biologicals to help them really grow. And we're switching more to no-till on the soybean side to try to mitigate tearing that soil up and pathogens. And it's working for us anyways.
Good. Caleb, how about you? What are you utilizing today?
Yep. So today is a little different. For a while, we had been using a lot of humic products. And then we'd kind of gotten away from that. I think it was more so we were working with a particular agronomist or particular co-op and things got switched. People moved different places and then that just kind of fell apart. But in the last couple of years, ever since we had a couple of really wet years in a row, it was our opportunity to switch into no-till, which is something that we've been experimenting with for a while. We have a couple of fields that have been no-till for well over a decade, and we're really starting to see some really great benefit there. But one of the things, if you're going into a no-till situation, like you were just talking, keeping that soil active and keeping those soil microbes moving so you can break down all of that plant matter that you've got is crucial. And so everybody gets really pushed on putting cover crops in, and I don't want to downplay cover crops at all. But the trouble with cover crops, at least where we're at, and we're probably kind of on the finer line because we're in the southern part of South Dakota. So I'm not saying we can't plant cover crops and get them to go. But it's a struggle, right? In a year like this year, I mean, we virtually had no rain this fall. So, if we'd have taken the beans off, even, the beans that did come off early in the middle of September, if I'd have gone out there and planted any kind of a cover crop in, I mean, I would have probably gotten it to germinate, but probably not much more than that, right?
Yeah.
And so at that point, you don't have much root mass, you don't have a lot of cover on top. And so what's your benefit out of that? Well, you didn't get a ton of soil benefit. It's not like you're going to go out and graze off, the inch worth of cover crop that you got out there. And there was a cost to putting that out there. So the question becomes, what biological products can we utilize to try and simulate and stimulate those soil microbes. And so been working and talking with Neil McCormick and the team here at FBN to work with some of the new products that they've been coming out with to look at that for next year. So we're going to be doing some trials, which if you're interested in doing the trials, that would be the plug I would put in, is go check out the IRL booth with the Innovators Research League. Because if you're not doing trials now, I mean, that's a place to start. They're looking to do trials in lots of different places. So that might be a fit for some people.
That's a great call out. I hadn't thought about that, but here at FBN, we're constantly looking for growers, right, to test products. We've got companies coming to us every day who feel like they've got a viable solution to help other farmers, and we want to make sure it's tested, right? And so a lot of people like to be a part of that, what we call the IRL, the Innovators Research League, but it really gives us true farm, what I call field testing. Right, so everybody can have their little strip trials, and 15 feet doesn't really tell me a whole lot. But give me 20 acres in a field, that tells me something, and that's kind of what we're looking at to really validate and showcase those results and that data with you all when these companies to us. So it's a great opportunity to try something new and be a part of our testing network that we have here at FBN. So thanks for the call out there on that. Mitch, I know you said you were doing some things too.
Yeah, we started last year. We did some side-by-side trials on we did about a third of our acres without any inhabit boost, and then the other 2/3 we did. And everywhere you went where it was side-by-side in the same field, the root mass was so much bigger. And for me, that means so much more to me, because everything we do is our fertilizer is all cow manure. I mean, we buy no commercial fertilizer. Everything is cow manure. So to me, and I plant 15-inch rows, so to get that root mass that much bigger, to be able to grab that much more, it made a world of difference. And then we also use a Taurus. Hoping to add a few more this next year, but that's what I have a personal experience with on the farm.
Okay. Are you using the Taurus as a stress mitigator then, or
Just
early or late?
On second pass spray.
Second pass sprays?
Yeah.
Yep.
I know one of the trials that I've got going for this next spring will be doing split applications of the Taurus.
Okay. Split up. Okay. Good deal. And you're on 15-inch corn then too?
Yeah, mine's a 15-inch corn. So, and then I noticed, like with the Taurus, where we put it versus where we didn't, the leaves, the same leaf height was bigger on what was put in the Taurus. And for me, taking it all for silage, a bigger leaf, there's just
more mass.
It's more mass, and it's more good feed, compared to just the rind of your stalk. The bigger leaf you can get, that's holding more nutrients. It just makes more.
Good. Any other questions from the audience? Let's make sure. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about genetic diversity. Of course, this has been a topic for several years now. Quite frankly, when FBN first started, one of the things that they talked about was product transparency, and of course, our network, you all sending in your seed tags, really brought that to light. Right. And I think what it showed was maybe where we weren't quite getting the genetic diversity that we thought we were, because, those codes were the same on a lot of those the seed brands out there. How do you go about your seed selection process and ensuring that you've got genetic diversity on your farm? I'll throw that out to whoever, I guess.
I'll start. I remember the first time I had to take a picture of the seed tag and send it in and unlock the seed finder. That was several years ago. I didn't quite understand it then, but then once I got in there and got to looking, I could actually tell that I wasn't buying the same bag of seed, from this dealer to this dealer, and then expecting two different results, because they told me they were two different things, but they might have been the same maturity, same parent, female or male. This way you could really make sure you're diversified, essentially, in your selections, and not single sourcing something. If you planted 3 different numbers and they were the same thing, you'd be winning or putting everything on one bet, and that's not a good thing in farming. You need to be diversified and make sure you are.
Others?
I mean, just spreading your risk in general. Majority of my farmers are, especially when it comes to maturity, every year, it doesn't matter. This year, like down here where we didn't get June 15th was our last rain, and then we didn't get rain again until the middle of August. So our early beans didn't do as well as our later beans, where last year it was the opposite. So for my guys, it's spreading that risk out by, making sure we have those early beans and then go later beans, same with corn, and just making sure we're planting those different genetic families across the farm. And there's two, just to his point, like I took on a new account this year and he had two different beans out there on one field and he's like, oh, yep, it's all stripped. Planter went one way and then every pass was a different bean and they're same maturity. And I was out in that field numerous times throughout the year and you can tell a difference on all of it. And so then I used the seed finder deal. We went through his numbers and it's like, okay, like you actually planted the same bean. You thought you were planting two different beans. And he's like, well, my cost on this one was, $5 a bag higher. And when he actually has a tracking deal on his phone, so he could tell exactly when his dad got done out of the combine. It's like, oh, well, this one averaged 60 bushels, and the other one was 60.2. And so for him, he's like, yeah, and a lot of people with that seed finder deal, and they don't realize that exists, that there's so many different companies that are selling the exact same product. So I try to go through that. Like I have a big Pioneer dealer that will buy seed from me as well. And so they know that there are products that could be the same as stuff that I'm selling. So we go through and kind of compare just to make sure that they're getting different varieties on all of those fields. But two, just spreading that risk when you're like, even if you're in a short term, you want 100-day to 200-day, just making sure you have those different varieties on your field on the corn to spread your risk. Because I wouldn't put if I was going to go bet on a horse race or something, I'm not going to go put 100% of my bet on one horse. I would rather put 20% down on 5 different horses. So
Looks like we got a couple questions out here.
Yeah, let's take the question. Go ahead, just introduce yourself and what's your question?
Chris from Kansas. I had a question. There are certain companies that don't actually list the variety tag on there. How can they legally get away with not doing that?
So it's actually.
I feel like
Go
it's
ahead,
just
Jen.
certain areas. So maybe in Kansas you have it, but so I sell stuff and I have communication and sell stuff with stuff in other states. So maybe if you're not getting it on your end, we may be getting the seed tag from somebody else with that same company in a different state.
So it's actually a state law. It's not a federal law that you need to put the varietal code on the tag. So each state is different. Now, for many seed companies, they sell in so many states or multiple states that it's not worth bagging some with the variety code and some without the variety code. So most of the times, they'll put it across, all their units that are being sold across multiple states. However, you've got some smaller companies, some regional companies that may sell within the geography where there is not a requirement to have that varietal code. So it will not be listed there. For those companies, it may be really difficult to kind of figure out what it is. Seed Finder is a great tool that has been mentioned a couple of times already. I don't know if there are other tools out there that can help, but Seed Finder, certainly if they do happen to segregate and sell some of those products with the varietal tag on there or the varietal code on there and some without, if those are being reported by members in other states, we will have that information in there. So you might be able to see it on Seed Finder. I'd tell you to check there first, but if they're just selling in states that don't require it, then we may not have that information on there. Good. Another question?
Yeah, I got a problem where I got some land that borders an acreage where there's a lot of lawns mowed and stuff like that. And I got a problem where ground squirrels are eating the seed corn out of the ground around that acreage. And I was just wondering, is there any kind of seed treatment you thought would kind of control that situation?
No. No. You're going to have to look outside of the box on that one. There's other options, but there's no seed treatment that's going to keep the squirrels away.
The only treatment I know for ground squirrels is
I have a cat that would be perfect on your farm. Yeah.
Dog will help. Yeah. Good. Other questions? Okay. Where were we? I think we were talking about genetic diversity.
Yeah,
Any other?
genetic diversity.
Yeah. Any other
I'll go a
comments?
little different way because I think we could probably talk about the seed finder and the concept of spreading your risk out on your farm. This was an aha moment just for me this year within FBN, looking at the F2F lineup. I got to go and visit the breeding station over by Sioux Falls by Brandon, and learn a little bit about behind the F2F lineup of corn genetics, what FBN has done in terms of we're all familiar with the network that we're a part of and this exchange of ideas that we're having here and that we're having during this whole conference. But FBN's done something similar on the breeding side with the breeders network. And so they're sharing those hybrids and trying to find different ways of crossing and bringing new hybrids to the market. And seeing that testing is being done locally, and they're trying to bring that genetic diversity into our areas, like a lot of the other companies are doing, but just it's on a little bit different scale, and that was really interesting for me to see this summer.
Yep. Good. Mitch, anything from your vantage point?
For me, not so much. I mean, it's a little harder for me to get a lot of diversity besides trying to look it up and do the same thing. For me, I have a tight window of when my days of seed, for maturity wise, just because we're harvesting it in such a quick fashion. I needed all the same moisture. I mean, I'm not jumping around or start at one side of the farms and work across the farms and chop all the corn. We do it in 2 stages. So our early corn will be like 112 day, and then we'll maybe plant some 110 day to 112. Then we'll come back on our late corn with like 101 to 102 day. So when you're running a tighter window, it makes it a little more difficult. I don't have quite as many options out there because I'm not taking on as big of range just because I needed all the same moisture within them 7 to 10 days.
Yep. What are y'all doing from a population standpoint? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about there, do we need to be pushing higher populations? Do we need to be backing off? Have we maxed out yet? I mean, where are we at from a population standpoint out there from your eyes?
We're planting 30 to 34,000 in our area. Just depends on the hybrid, if it's a semi-fixed or fixed or full flex ear. That's really what matters. What population we run. We'll go down to 30 on a full flex or a semi-flex around 32-ish. I know there's a few guys that we've tried population studies where we went up to 38 and it just don't pan out for us. And
So you have pushed the population,
Yeah.
just not seeing the
and
benefit
we
there.
the yield either stayed there or fell a little bit.
Okay.
We got a clay pan soil where we're at, doesn't drain well. I mean, we're on a prairie, so we can get a good semi-flex ear. We'll just plant around 32 and go. But you don't want to give up yield with population though by being too much under or too much over. There's that fine. You just kind of got to figure your soils out and how that cob's going to feel, pollinate all the way out to get the best benefit. So I've seen guys plant it too thick and you get that tip back and you're just shooting yourself in the foot at that point.
Yeah, we certainly saw a lot of tip back this year across the Midwest. I know with some of the environmental conditions we had this year. How about the rest of you from a population standpoint on corn? What are you pushing the envelope? Are you testing? Are you doing comparisons? Are you population studies? Any kind of that work that you're doing?
So I know for us, we're doing kind of all the above. So we're at full variable rate on our planting on soybeans and corn.
Okay.
So our corn ranges where we're at, I think on the low end, we're 24,000, maybe 26,000. On the high end, we're probably doing tests 32 to 34,000. And in between the given fields for us, we've got a lot of low lying areas in our fields that have some variability. And so we've got good fertility on the hills and some decent drainage. And so those areas tend to do well. And then we get some of these soggy, low alkaline bottoms. And it seems like if we back off the population a little bit there, you're not maybe putting quite as much risk into it because you're not going to get a whole lot out of it. And some of those plants need some room to spread out just because all the nutrient tie up with the salts. But the biggest tool that I have with variable rate planting is the ability to go in and put in learning blocks in different places. And so we try to do that all the time is, okay, so yes, we think that this area of the field, we should push the population a little bit, but what if we don't? What if we back it off? And so it's really easy to go in on the software and say, okay, let's do a block, a couple of strips here at a higher population, a couple of strips here at a lower population. And then you don't have to think about that as you're going through with the planner. It's just automatically adjusting for that. And then at the end of the season, we can lay those maps over the top of our harvest maps. And I can do that on the desktop software that I have, or I can do that right in the FBN app if I've uploaded my planting data and my harvest data, and kind of use the little slider window to go back and forth and see if you can notice the difference or not. So that's been interesting. On the soybean side, I haven't played around with it a ton. I know there's another CB in my area. We were up at his place this year, and he was doing some trials on some soybeans, and it was the soybean populations in our area. We've been trending down with the populations instead of going the other way. And I haven't pushed it quite as far as he has. If he's out here, you could talk to Joe somewhere. But it was fascinating to see some soybeans planted, below 80,000. And they were pretty phenomenal looking. And in terms of, had those next to something that was planted at 120 or 140,000. So, but again, it all comes back to, don't be afraid to try some things on your farm. Put some strips in, put some trials in, evaluate it at the end of the season and see what works.
Yeah, I guess for us, we've kind of just been steadily pushing it up. Like I said, we're 15-inch rows. We're up to like 36,000. Hoping to go some more studies this year and trials and backing that population down, especially on a feed digestibility standpoint. I know there's some guys around my area that have went to what they're calling is better than BMR, which is just taking your full flex. You're backing the population down on a feed standpoint so you can get a bigger girth of your stalk, because your non-digestibility of your stalk is your outside rind of the plant. So the bigger you can get that, the less rind in the silage. So they're actually backing it down to like 26,000. They're losing just a tick of tonnage, but they're picking up quite a bit of digestibility, and they're down to like I said, like 26,000. So I'm not sure if I'm ready to go that far yet, but we're gonna try some, and we'll maybe do some small strips of dropping it way down, especially in the 15-inch row. I'm thinking then we're gonna be spread out, and that's why we pushed it, because of being in 15s. They're everywhere. We're spreading that out, and we'll see what it does.
Yeah.
So for my area, I would say we are on corn. We're anywhere from 26 to 38. I have some guys that'll push 40 on corn, but the majority of it is variable rate, and it's all based off of past year yield data. So they're overlaying all those yield maps to create their A, B, C zones, and they'll put the check blocks in there to where, so if you have a A zone that's you're planting 38,000, there will be a check block, 2 or 4 acre check block in there where they're going up to 42,000, or one that's going less, to see if you did that accurately. And this year, like with the lack of rain we had down here, I recommend going out late in the season too, because there was some stuff where we pushed on the A zones and it's like, nope, we need to back those zones back. But the more yield data that you can get to overlay those maps, the better, and the more accurate it will be. But yeah, I would say like northern Iowa, we have some sand stuff around that Okoboji area where we're doing 26, just because it's tough ground, but that's what works best for them. And beans, I feel like way back in the day, it was Pioneer was the big one that was always pushing 200,000 seeds per acre, and so it was always every year I get my guys to kind of step down, but the majority of them are doing 140, and I think the highest I have is 150, and I have guys that are planting 80 to 85 in Sioux County, that 30,000 acre ground. They're planting 85,000 seeds per acre. So but just the cost savings that they've seen on it, and then at the end of the year, the data they're getting back on it. I'm out, like, I'm a seed salesperson, so I make money off of selling seed, but going out there and telling somebody that they can cut their seed costs by taking their population back and then proving that to them, they're seeing that firsthand. So,
Good.
but I can't say, you guys are from all over, so I'm not telling you to go out and take your populations back, but that's just what we're seeing in Western Iowa.
Good. We've got just a few minutes left. Just want to check. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, how about we just wrap up here?
We got one.
Got a question or not? Yep.
Inoculant on soybean seed. I've heard people say don't don't plant without it. And I've heard people say it's snake oil. What does everybody think?
Inoculants?
He's already heard my opinion on this one. I know him, so I'll let you.
We always inoculate. It's one of those things consistently for us. It's paid year in and year out. And I think it pays more years than it doesn't pay. There probably, I'm sure, is an outlier year or two here or there. But I think it gives you that extra little bit of insurance. And I think it's good for us anyway.
Jen, I know he knows you, but what's
Yeah.
your answer to that for the rest of the audience?
For just do some trials with it. So
Do some trials?
yes.
Yep.
His ground is a little different than most. So
Okay. All right. Good. Any other questions? It's really tough to see, so I want to make sure. Okay, we got just a few minutes here, so just some parting comments, if you will. And Brian, we'll start with you. But if I'm sitting here in the audience and I'm thinking about my seed selection for 2023, what needs to be top of mind for me as I'm thinking about my decision process for next year?
Kind of, what markets you're going to be able to hit. So if you're going to mow more corn or more soybeans, and then just pricing versus ROI on, am I going to go buy this full traded bag for this field and conventional for this field, and just make things work for your farm. Really, it's as far as like talking populations too, knocking them down, trying different things, just testing stuff. But pricing's ROI at the end is the main thing that's going to keep us all going.
Good. Jen, how about you?
I would say the traits are more, for our area, it's more talking to your neighbors, seeing what they're planning. Because we've had a big shift with Enlist. All the dicamba acres are going to Enlist, and I had a farmer in my office, and I was talking to him like, hey, everyone around you is going to Enlist, and he's like, what, they are? And so he was going to be the only dicamba person out there. And two, just chemical. So the chemical market has gotten better. I deal with chemical every day. I'm surprised I still have hair, but just last year was very tough, and just knowing what your chemical market is, those chemical prices, and just kind of going through, especially if you're trying to decide on extend versus Enlist, going through and comparing those prices. So.
Good. Kelly?
I would say it hit me last night as I was thinking about this for today. When he was talking about the spot in the rock where he was climbing up, and now that he didn't have a rope on, he was thinking about it in a whole different way, right? And I think in the seed world, I think it's that same situation. Is don't be afraid to think a little bit outside the box. Going back to your comment on two, that was our pioneer guys back in the day on soybeans too. It was 200,000 or bust, and then for a long time it was like, oh, you were planting 160,000 or bust. It didn't matter, And at some point in time, somebody got comfortable with the idea that, do we really need to do that, right? And now, at least for us, as we've been experimenting with it, we're like, no, we really don't. We can do something different, and I think that totally applies in this whole discussion about traded versus conventional versus, even just backing off on the traits. Maybe you don't need a triple stack. Maybe you just need a single trait. Maybe you need just two traits. What is the right fit for you? And at the end of the day, it all comes back to ROI. And as prices continue to go up on most things as we go along, everybody's more conscious of that, obviously, as we go along. And right now, with prices of commodities being up, it's not been as big a deal. But like they were talking about, you get that black swan event. If we get prices in the markets to correct, all of a sudden we're going to be all sitting here pinched because we're buying really expensive fertilizer, really expensive chemical, really expensive seed, and now it's not worth anything. Now what do you do? So it's keeping those pencils sharp, and I think part of keeping your pencil sharp is keeping an outside view and look outside the box every once in a while.
And chemical, like your weed control too, is the biggest thing. Our area was, I'm not saying everyone's area, but like the extend dicamba, for the weediest fields and Enlist, just with how it worked out last year, everything was clean. So
Yep,
it's another thing to look at.
Mitch, how about you?
Yeah, I guess for me, the biggest thing is probably different than the guy that's doing the grain side. Like I said, I'm looking for the plant, how healthy it is, what it's going to do for me to get the production out of it for milk. And with saying that as well, though, you got to try something different. And to your point, back off some traits. Can you get away with it? Can you save some money and still get the same yield? And for me, that's just kind of goes the same way with trying some different seeds to see if I can still get the feed value I need out of that crop in order to feed the cows, where if I can save some money to do that, then that's well worth it. Like I put in a plot with 10 different varieties this year, and I've been looking at it, and it's kind of all over the place. So it's really just, I got to sit down yet and put some more numbers to, well, this seed's a little more money, but is my feed value going to be better than the next?
Mhm.
I guess
Good.
that's my point.
Good. All right. Well, our time is up today. I want to thank the audience here. Appreciate you coming in and stepping in for our seed trends conversation for 2023. And certainly want to thank our panel. It can be a bit daunting up here under these lights a little bit, but Brian, Jen, Caleb, and Mitch, yes, join me in thanking our panel. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And let's have a great 2023. Thanks, folks.